Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast, and I'm really excited to have and very pleased to have Karen Williams on the show today. Now, Karen is one of UK's leading book mentors. She's inspired hundreds of business authors who want to write a book that positions them as an authority and becomes a business building tool. So she's just my kind of girl. Lady, woman, whatever the term.
Girl's good. I like girl.
And just before we get started, don't forget, I love to give things away. So if you want to get a free copy of my book, PowerWords, Attract High-Paying Clients and Customers, don't forget to go to www.PowerWords.pro/freebook. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be here today.
So Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself. So you're a leading book mentor. I want to hear more about that.
Well, I never set out to become a book mentor. I never set out to write a book. So I've been in business since November 2006. But it was August 2009 when I made that decision, that fateful moment when I had learnt some really great gems as part of some NLP training I was doing. I had the opportunity to model some really successful coaches. And when I started learning some of the things I was learning, I thought, wouldn't it be great to turn this into a book? As you do. Not realizing at the time how long it would take, what pain I'd go through, but also what amazing results it would give me as well. So that was really the start of my journey. So it was just over 10 years ago, I started writing my first one. 18 months later, I stood up in front of 80 people at my book launch. I launched it. I said never again. And it was probably about 9 months later that I started writing my second one. And I just published my sixth book, Becoming an Authority. So it's been quite a journey. But I really found that my books started to put me on the map. So I wasn't book mentoring until around about end of 2013, beginning of 2014, when a lot of my clients started to come to me for my advice, because I think I was on book number 3 at that stage. And that's really where it all started. And I've had the joy of doing TEDx. I've had the joy of being, speaking around the world. It's been an amazing journey, and also inspiring, loads and loads of people to write their books, whether it's through following the principles in my book, working with me one-to-one. It's been a fabulous journey to make that bigger difference.
Wow. I think you and I have a somewhat similar journey. I actually started writing books just to help my team members. I was working from home, and I worked for a company that was across my country. I had team members all over the place, and I wrote books just to teach them some different things that I wanted them to know. And, little did I know the impact that, writing books would have. And it's amazing how people see you differently. Like, I remember the first time I went to our national conference after writing these books, and just, I gave them away for free. Like, I just wanted to help people. And all of a sudden at that conference, people were coming up to me. And I mean, I'd been sharing my knowledge freely for years. Now, all of a sudden, because I wrote the books, people were coming up to me. And by the end of that weekend, I had like 6 coaching clients.
Wow. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It does put you in a different level. And I think, I started writing my first one 10 years ago, and things have changed hugely since then. We both know that more and more people are doing it these days. It's become much more common to have a book to your name. But back then, it was just a few people were writing books. And it tended to be those that had quite a big following, that were quite well known. And there were very few people like me. And I don't know how long ago that you started writing. There weren't very many people at that stage who were doing it. But fast forward, it's changed so much. So we have to do things differently if we're going to stand out these days.
Well, and I think it's important to note that, a lot more people are writing books, but if you really still look at the percentage of people who are writing books, I mean, it's so low. I mean, I think it's still maybe less than 1% of people actually get through and write their book.
Well, there's a difference between starting and finishing, isn't there, Kim? A huge difference.
That is so true. That is so true. So, Karen, in your experience as a book mentor, I know with my clients, even though many times we're actually writing their book for them, they hit the wall. And talk a little bit about that, or whatever words you use for it, and how did people overcome that?
Gosh, well, there's so many different areas where people hit the wall, isn't there? So I find with many people who come to me they've been dreaming about writing a book for ages. So they've been maybe 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, so that they've had the dream, but the thing that stops them right at the very beginning is knowing how to get started.
Mm-hmm.
Because it feels like a really big thing, doesn't it? It feels quite overwhelming. You know, what's the first thing you do? What's the second thing you do? And a lot of people think, oh, I just need to go to my computer and write. But actually, that's kind of I've got a 10-step or 10 principles I teach now. And the fifth one is writing. There's 4 things you need to do first.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people, they don't know where to start. Time. Certainly I found that with my latest book, I had to take myself away to write it because I knew that was the only way I was going to make it a priority. So I had to go away, took myself away for 4 days, about 22,000 words. And that's what worked for me. And that type of thing works for some clients as well. Overwhelm, not knowing what to do, and conflicting information as well. And I think one of the reasons I write, and probably why you write as well, is we want to get rid of some of the myths out there.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to help people to do it as easy as possible. And overwhelm in knowing, you know, what's involved with the process. And a lot of people don't know some of the jargon that we're used to,
Mm-hmm,
like
yes.
what's the difference between developmental editing and copy
Mm-hmm.
editing. What's, you know, why do you need a designer, you know, how to typeset a document, and why it's probably the last thing that you want to do is to learn how to do it yourself. And so it's all of those types of things, and people don't realize the whole process. And then that's where people like you and I come in to help people with it. So yeah, I think it's time, overwhelm, and imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Syndrome. I know we talked about that when we had our initial call. That is something that gets a lot of people. I had it with my first book. And even now, you know, even when I was sending out my current book for peer review, and bear in mind, this is book number 6, I was sending it out to half a dozen people for peer review, and I was just going to read it one more time. And one of the ladies who does know me, she doesn't know me very well, but she does know me, she said, Karen, just press that send button. I need to go away next week. I need to read it over the weekend. So it just gave me the boost and the kick I needed to make it happen. So I think even the most experienced writers go through all of this at some level.
I don't know about you, but because I didn't have money back then, I had to learn how to format books and typeset books myself.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Let's just say that my computer almost went through the window. I don't know about how many times. I think, you know, there was a lot of frustrating things about learning how to write, but I think formatting was probably the most frustrating thing that I went through in that whole process.
Yeah, I was lucky I was able to get someone. So that very first book, again, I went through months of not knowing how to get it published. And I came across a company in the UK who did all of that for me. But it was very basic. So they stuck to a template.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no, you know, the designer that we use under Librotas now, you know, she does, every book we do is totally bespoke, different fonts, different designs. But back then it was functional. It did what I needed it to do. It formatted it. You know, there was no sort of, you know, bells and whistles, but, you know, I'd hate to have had to learn it myself. Really would have done.
Well, the only good thing now is I find is that you can do some really nice formatting just using Microsoft Word.
Mm.
And, you know, so when I teach courses on formatting, I actually teach people to do it in Microsoft Word because it's a program that they generally, you know the basics, and I can teach them some of the advanced functions for. That creates a nice book. Like, I mean, that's not super duper fancy with all the bells and whistles, but if you want just a really nice looking book, then yeah. So, you know, I think the technology has just come so far,
absolutely,
you know, in the last 10 years that it allows people to be able to do these things.
Yeah, and one of the things I touch on in my new book, Becoming an Authority, is, you know, what has changed in the last 10 years. So publishing, for example, has changed hugely in terms of, you know, independent publishing, indie publishing, self-publishing,
yes,
technology. You know, when I wrote my first book, The Secrets of Successful Coaches, I think I was about a page on social media. And if you think about how we connected via Facebook, through a Facebook group, with technology these days, in Book Marketing Made Simple, which was my 5th one, there's probably 3 or 4 chapters devoted to to social media, let alone the rest of technology. And things have moved on so much in that time, which means it's easier with, you know, programs like Scrivener that some people use. I don't personally. You know, Word is advanced, and wow, you know, we've got so many tools at our disposal now.
Yes. So I know that you came prepared with some wonderful hints and tips for us today.
I have indeed. That's one thing. I'm a pretty structured person. I think I always like to be prepared, although I think one of the advantages of writing books is that you've always got so much material to draw on. You know, you don't have to think, oh, what am I going to talk about today? You can go, okay, well, this is what I'm going to share. So shall I get on with it?
I think so. I think for you and I, it's narrowing down what we're going to say.
Oh, I know.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. So with my new book, Becoming an Authority, there are 10 principles that I teach. So as I said, writing is principle for scheduling and scribing, because they all have an S in there somewhere. That's kind of my signature process now. That is principle number 5. So there's 4 things you need to do first, but I'm just going to talk about the first one today. So the first principle that I think we all need to do when we're writing a book is start with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with the end in mind is broken down into 3 areas. So the first one is vision.
Yes.
So one of the things I advise clients to do is to really have a clear vision for their book when they get started. Because unless you know what you want it to do for you, your readers and your business, you're going to struggle to get to the end point.
Yes.
So I did a bit of research back in the summer, and there were 2 kind of individual goals that people had. So one was personal and one was business. So around the personal side of things, people were saying, you know, I want to leave a legacy. I want to make a bigger difference. I want to reach more people. I want to fulfill a lifelong dream. And then on the business side of things, there were things like, you know, I want to be perceived as an expert. I want to do keynote speeches. I want to have it turned into a blockbuster film, I think one person said. I want to stand on stage, travel around the world. You know, there's obviously different people's visions, but it's just really thinking about what do you want the book to do for you and your business. And a question I quite like to ask people is, you know, imagine it's a year from today, and you've written your book, you've published it. What would you like to have said you've achieved in that year? What would you like to, you know, what accolades would you like to have? What would you like people to have said at your book launch? So vision is my first tip. Shall I move on to the second, or have you got any questions around vision?
I think I just want to hone in on vision, because I think that's so incredibly important, because if you don't have a vision, how do you know who you're writing the book to, and how do you know what to write the book about?
Yeah.
But, you know, something that you said, everybody has a different goal. And I think, you know, you mentioned some really big goals, but I think there's also some really small goals too. I mean, you know, your book becomes your extended business card, right? So some people think, well, I don't want to be on stage. I don't want to be this, but I want to build my business. And they don't realize that that book is just a marketing tool. And even, you know, just by getting it out there in small ways, that you can use it to generate business.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be big goals, but also I'm very much aware that, you know, I think some people think they write a book, they put it on, you know, Amazon and all good online bookstores, and it's going to sell, but it won't sell with any effort. So I think it's just being realistic in terms of the vision and knowing what you want it to do. That's pretty key. Whether it's, you know, a lot of us, I do sell my books, but I give them away probably, you know, just as much as I sell them now, because I want my message to reach more people. So it's not about the book sales, it's about, you know, it's about making a bigger difference, and also the business that often comes off the back of the book. And that, as you say, that authority raising as well. Yeah,
and I think that's important to note, because a lot of, you know, potential clients I've spoken to, they go into it thinking that they're going to make their money from the book sales, but that's not how you make your money with a book. So can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Well, that comes to my tip number 2, which is alignment. So we're on the same page. So it's almost like you knew what I was talking about. And I know I'm talking about, and I know you don't. So the second thing I would say is about aligning everything in your business, because if your business is on this topic here, and then you're writing about this topic here, you're not going to, obviously, as we've just talked about, Kim, you're not going to make money from book sales alone. And I do have people come to me and say, you know, I'm not doing it for the money. And that's actually a good thing, because if you're not doing it for the money, because the book sales alone, if you're looking at making, I don't know, £3 per book, you know, once, you know, everybody's taken their cut, you know, you're going to have to sell a lot of books to recoup your investment. So what I always suggest clients do is align everything together. So your book, your business, and I know that I'm preaching to the converted here, your book and your business is totally aligned. So if you are helping people who have gone through a devastating illness, your book is about that. If you are doing keynote speeches about your journey, your book is about your journey.
Yes.
If you are helping people to write books, your book is about helping people to write books. So it's just having everything aligned. And once you've done that, obviously it makes it easier to write it, because you might find that you've got 100 blogs you've written, and it might be 50 of those blogs could lead to content for the book.
Mm-hmm.
You might find your book leads to content for the blog. So when it comes to the time, which is one of the biggest barriers, it makes it easier to write it. And then it really comes down to then making money off the back of it, which is my third point, which is leverage, which is once you've got everything aligned, and maybe you have something free on your website that leads to your book, and then your book leads to a course or program where people can work on it to a different level, or one-to-one services. The alignment and then the leverage go hand in hand. How can you use that book as a platform to make that bigger difference? So they're kind of the three things: vision, alignment, and leverage, and they all kind of merge in together anyway.
Mm-hmm. That is so awesome, Karen.
So I'm assuming you've got, that obviously links into what you do when you're working with your clients as well.
Yeah, like I use different words for it, but those are the first conversations that I have with clients. Whereas as you're more of a book mentor, we actually have the done for you services where we actually write. But, that initial process is still the same, even when we're writing the books. Because when I work with clients, if they're not clear on those three things, the beginning of the book writing process is hard, and they're not liking the results. And, finally, I have to take a step back, and I say to them, I say, you know what, usually when you hate something I've given you, and it doesn't happen often, but it has happened where a client has really hated something I've done. That's not fun. But it actually turned out to be a really good thing, because when they saw it and they saw what I perceived they were saying, they realized that they weren't clear in what they were saying, because I was using their words for things. And so all of a sudden it became a clarity process. And once that was done, then the book, it went beautifully, because now they were clear on what they were using the book for, who they were writing the book to, all those key things. So, I know you would agree, is that as much as you want to get to writing the book, because all of a sudden you've got this energy, you want to do it, go back and review this podcast and listen to those 3 steps again, and get those 3 things in alignment first before you start to write your book, because it's going to make the whole process so much faster.
Absolutely. And I think, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, so many of us have got so much we could talk about, so much we do talk about. And actually, when you hone it down into your subject, so that your book is about this subject, and you might have a second book which is about this, which is related, then it makes it easier. So moving on from starting with the end in mind, it's about being really clear on your subject. It's about clear on your secret sauce, the thing that makes your book different. Then you move on to the structure, and then you can start writing it. So it does feel like quite a long process. But actually, for me, when I work with clients, if I work one-to-one with clients, I tend to do a day with them to map out their book. And we pretty much cover the first 4 principles in that day most of the time. We go from idea, and normally by that time they've got a clear-ish idea of who they're writing it for, and we just hone it down to make it easier to write. But as you say, we have the energy, we want to write, but you can write thousands and thousands of words that you never use unless you get that first bit sorted first.
So let's go back to your first book, because this is something I love to talk to authors about, because many of the listeners of this podcast are going to be people who are interested in writing that book for their business. So Karen, what was probably the hardest thing you experienced in writing that first book?
Gosh, it's knowing how to do it. So knowing, being a pretty structured person, I did have a plan for it. It probably wouldn't be as comprehensive as it would be now. But the biggest thing I went through is the whole self-doubt, the imposter syndrome coming out. So I'd written the book, I'd interviewed the people for the book, I knew exactly what was going when, and then I went through what if no one likes it? it was kind of me putting my head above the parapet when I'm an introvert. I'm a writer, and suddenly I knew I had to put myself out there. What if people didn't like it? What if I got a bad review on Amazon? And what if the people I'd interviewed didn't like what I had to say as well? I did get their permission for everything that I quoted from them, but there was still that little bit of angst around it, because these were people I idolized, people I looked up to, people who are quite well known within the coaching industry. And then there was little me, and that's how it felt at the time. So I did go through, a lot of internal angst when I was in that stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people do, don't they?
They came up with a term for it. I call it analysis paralysis.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got over my perfectionism over the years, and although I like things to be right, I do believe, and this is something one of my mentors said to me many years ago. She said, imperfect action is better than no action. So it's better to do something, even if it's not quite right, than to just think about it and never take action with it.
Yeah, because you can get results with a book that's not perfect.
Absolutely. It's never going to be perfect.
Well, I was just about to say that, but
yeah, because there's always, when I was writing my latest one, there were things now I thought, I could add that, I haven't included that, but there has to be a stage where you go, it's good enough.
I know I put aside my book just for a short period of time with getting this podcast on and starting an online funnel, but I had been working on the book. I had left it for a bit and I came back to it, and it was actually a good thing, because in that time I had gotten some more clarity. So it was actually a good thing for me. But now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm itching to get back to writing it again. And, but one thing I've learned is that, being an entrepreneur, sometimes you can get so much on your plate that, so for me, I made it the priority, get this podcast going and, get my funnel done, because that's two things I've been wanting to do. And I know, with winter setting in, I don't travel as much. I'll have more time for writing. Mm-hmm. So, the goal is to get it out in early 2020, because it's already part done. So.
Well, that's the thing. It's about knowing when you want to do it. And I think with my first book, I was quite over optimistic with how I was going to get it out there. So, I also went through the whole, how do I get it published? And I went down the route of, I didn't know any different back then. So I looked for a traditional publisher. I got our copy, in the UK, we have the Writers and Artists Yearbook. So I sent my manuscript. Well, followed their proposal guidelines, sent it out to quite a few people. And I did actually have somebody interested. But by that time, I'd found a partnership publisher and I worked with them, because it really I felt like I had more control over the book. I knew exactly where I wanted the book to go. So I was quite clear on my vision, and I didn't want someone A, to take control, or B, to wait another year for it to be published. It took me 18 months from start to finish. I wanted to get it out there quickly, quickish, not to compromise quality, but I knew that I found a company I trusted that were recommended. So I really just wanted to get it out there. And I think when you get to that stage, you just want to see the fruits of your labor, don't you? You want that book in your hand. You don't want to think, I have to wait another year for it. You want to have it and then do something with it.
Well, and I think that's the thing important too, because not that there's anything wrong with traditional publishing, but, you don't have to be traditionally published to become an author, get that book out there and use it for your business. Like, people don't look at the publisher anymore, right? Like, you can self-publish your book, whether in partnership, with a company like myself, where, we help you get everything ready and get it uploaded. You still self-publish it, or, like you with your mentoring and your guidance. But, I think nowadays it's important for people to realize they can self-publish if you so choose and still get a lot of results.
Absolutely. The most important thing is that it looks good and the content's good. It doesn't matter who's on the name of the cover, does it? Whether it's Librotas, whether it's your brand, or whether it's the self-publishing, as long as the content's good and it does what it needs to do, that's the most important thing. It looks good, it feels good, that people love it. That's it comes back down to the feedback, doesn't it? What people say about it. And if it's hitting the mark, it really doesn't matter, how it's out there.
So Karen, we've got a minute or two left. Do you have anything else you want to share with my audience today?
Gosh, yeah, I think the main thing is I come across so many people who dream about writing a book and they have been putting it off for so long. So I would say if 2020 is the year to write your book, just get on and do it. Get help, get support, you know, just get off that starting blocks and start writing it. But make sure you do the planning first, of course. So that's probably my best piece of advice. And obviously, if anyone wants to find out more about what I do, if you go to Librotas.com, which is www.librotas, which is LIBROTAS.com, there's loads of free resources. There's a Get Started workbook. I do webinars occasionally. I went audio first with this book as well. I know Kim and we've been talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I documented everything I did when I went audio first. So there's loads of free resources on there, or just get in touch and I'll be happy to have a chat with anyone who's interested in getting their book out there.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. This has been awesome. And
Thank
I think we'll have you back on again, because I think there's more that we can talk about in terms of publishing. I actually, over the last couple of weeks, have interviewed a couple of different publishers, and it's been amazing because you and I each have our own specialty, and yet there's so much in common and so much that we can share. So definitely, I think come the new year, we'll have you on again, and we'll find another topic we'll delve deep into to help our listeners take that step and become an author. So this is Kim Thompson-Pinder. I've been with Karen Williams, and this is the Author to Authority podcast.